All right, final chapter. I gotta admit this was kind of fun, and I've always wanted to just do this from start to finish because I have some stuff that I show my students, but it's of other people's artwork. So I always wanted to do this for my students, and I finally got it. Now I'm going to refine this for everyone. I'm going to work on it a little bit off camera, but I don't want to work on it too much on camera because I think I got my point across to you. I think you understand what I'm talking about. So let's just kind of think about what would your drawings be like if you did this process. Now, I think this whole thing with me filming it has been under 2 hours. And of course, I gave it a little bit of thought before I started filming it. So let's go out on a limb and say a big bad 3 hours of your time. Now, again, if you did this 1 inch by 2 inch drawings, it would be like less than that. It would be an hour of your time. So this will make you draw better. This will give you confidence to tackle any type of landscape drawing, any type of scene. And let's recap. So basically the first thing that you want to do to avoid the Amish quilt, no offense to the Amish quilt, they keep you warm in the winter, they're very pretty, but they're very patchy and they're not going to stand out on your website online as a little 4x6 postcard that you mail out to a client. It's just not going to pop as much as a drawing that you do or a painting that you do or an illustration that you do that has an overlying compositional shape for the shadow and the light. Okay, so after you think about this compositional shape, then you think about this grid. And there's some people do thirds. I like to divide my grid into fours. And so basically you cut it in half horizontally, and your most important items in your composition should touch these 4 inner squares or rectangles, however you're working. And if you're going to be balanced, they should be on the inside. If they're going to be unbalanced, cropping off the image, then maybe do stuff on the outside. So let's say I wanted to crop our composition. Let me take these 2 little pieces of paper. So now I've got her cropped, and down here, now this would be off balance because she would be touching the outer 4 rectangles over here. See what I mean? And if I even wanted to do something like this and do it the opposite way, crop her like that, I'm working with this bottom image right over here. So now that's totally off balance. And so you would just do the grid for this as well. You can play with the paper as well. Now the thing, while I'm talking about this in this last chapter, be very, very, very careful where you crop the figure, because if I just dropped the paper, I want to use it. If I were to crop her at the knees, at the bottom of the dress, that's not pleasing to the eye. And, some people would do that on purpose. They would want a scene that's not pleasing to the eye. But just be very careful where you crop things. Don't crop at joints. Don't crop at the knee. Don't crop at the ankles. It almost looks like her feet were chopped off. Don't have her feet touching the bottom of the picture plane. Leave a little space over there. Again, these little tricks will either give you comfort, show the viewer comfort, or give the viewer discomfort. So I'm trying to make everything pleasing to the eye in this scene. So again, you would do the opposite. Let's say you're doing a scene where somebody is trapped in a small place, whatever your story is that you're illustrating, then you would kind of zoom in and crop in on everything. So first thought, compositional shape, use the grid to help place items, and also use the grid as an extra bonus of transferring from small to big. Okay, do a 3-value study. It could be very informal, but do it and then squint at it to make sure it's working. Do it with charcoal, do it with marker, do it with watercolor wash. Whatever's going to be the quickest way to get it done, but do it. I was actually thinking about doing this in Photoshop for you, and one of these scenes I might do as a screencast in Photoshop. But the first scene I want to do traditionally with a pencil, this would take you 2 seconds in Photoshop to do with a big brush with 3 values of gray. Do the 3-value study, and then do the all-value study. Plan it out. Use perspective in your all-value study. I was already thinking about where I wanted you to look first, second, and third when I did this, compositional shape, because I knew she was going to overlap that powerful horizontal line over there. And then as I went, I changed that horizontal line into really utilizing the perspective to pull us into this valley over here in the background, which will be much easier seen when I do the big drawing. This is just like a little study. Think about in your drawings what you're going to have empty and what you're going to have busy. Okay, now there's a couple other things that I'm leaving out. I'll talk to you about them in scene number 2, the next landscape piece that I do. Let's say this is too empty for you. Okay, there's this thing called a visual seesaw. If all of my weight is on this, in this compositional shape, all my texture, all my value, and this looks a little empty for you, just give yourself some flicks of like grass, some texture over here, and that will balance your scene and still keep with the integrity of the light, empty feel of this compositional shape. This edge is a little hard over here. I don't want you to look at this edge, so I just kind of like maybe soften this, but everything's leading us back. Everything is there for a reason. Yes, you can have happy accidents, but as a professional artist, you want to tell a story, you want to be consistent, and these 4 simple ways that I just showed you, there's actually more than that because each one contains a lot of other little things, help to lead my eye, help to tell the story. I could even put like maybe her father, let's get melodramatic over here, her father is leaving on like a horse. Okay, I can have him like going away into the sunset, he had enough, and he's running away. Or if this girl is older, could be like a romance type scene, or could turn it into a Civil War scene. There's a zillion different ways that you can go, and you can put a secondary character over here, and even your secondary character could be hidden in the shadow. You can make them pop more. There's many different things that you can think about. And I did briefly talk about color, but value, like what I just showed you, 80%, color would be the 20. So if you're dealing with all these yellow greens and earthy browns, you can go with the cool purples, and that would pop like big time. Okay. And lastly, what I'll say, if you decide to do that, well, most of your intense yellows are going to be a little bit closer to your main character that you really want to have pop out. But I'm making her pop primarily with this pure white against that pure dark. The only other place I'm going to have pure white is right over here, and that's in the center of like my grid, right in the center. So I'm using the grid to my advantage that way too. All right, so now let's move on to the big drawing, and I'll discuss all this texture stuff and all this little nuances in the big drawing.